Okay, so any questions about what we've discussed? Then we can sort of tie things up, read a bit more of Lama, get a blessing from his words. Any questions? Sure. Yeah, is that a question? No. Okay, so let's finish reading from Lama this chapter, just for the blessing, okay? Just hear it. All right. Flip over from where you went off before. So now investigate ego's real view. What's this? Did we read this or not? We did read that, yeah. Wait. Okay, so we finished with saying, you know, looking deeply, go more deeply. So with your mindfulness fish, watch for that eye, the eye that exists from itself, without depending on the name, that goes beyond your relative characteristics. Try to identify this I that you totally believe exists somewhere here, the real I, the real self. This is difficult. It's not easy to catch this projection of the simultaneously born ego. This is ego. You need sharp wisdom. Sometimes it will come, but you will miss it. So your mindfulness fish must watch intently. Do not conceptualize. Keep the focus on the natural experience of your consciousness, your universal consciousness. You experience peace, joy, bliss. Well, that's fortunate if you do. I'm still waiting for that. Without moving the ocean of your mind, use your mindfulness fish. Now, for a moment, it might catch ego mind holding the objectively existent I, which appears to exist without label, without name, without any circumstances. And then, for a moment, it will discover, your ego mind, this mindfulness fish, it will discover that such an entity is totally non-existent. So you get a flash of that. You might get a moment. Your subtle wisdom comprehends non-duality I, non-self-existent I. Experience the selflessness. Let go. Again, the intuitive ego view will come, and again you will feel that the I is there. Again penetrate, and again it will disappear, and an experience of non-duality will come. I mean, this is fortunate if you have that. Most of us won't, you know. Each time you find the non-existence of your I, each time you find the non-existence of your I, not each time you find nothing is there, they're different. Each time you find the non-existence of your I, which should give you a shock, you are experiencing non-duality. You are experiencing Mahamudra, emptiness. You discover, like the dollar one, which is not a nice one because you'd rather have your pounds in the bank, but not just seeing nothing in the bank, that's nothingness, that's nihilistic, but you see the absence of your 5,000 pounds. You see the absence of what you thought was there. That's what it means. You see you catch the absence of this I that you thought was there. So that the finding of the absence of the I is in reference to the believing in the opposite. That's the point. So the finding of absence of 5,000 pounds in your bank is related to the belief that there was 5,000 pounds in your bank. It's a rich kind of thing. It's not just, oh, there's nothing there. You've got to hear the difference. The finding of the absence of independent I is in reference to your belief that there was one there. That's the point. Your belief has been shocked. You know, that's the thing. So there's quite a bit here, so you can just read it yourself. So he says, so keep your awareness on the clarity of your consciousness. So again, your mindfulness fish watches intently, checking how ego mind holds the self, this deepest nature, this concrete, unconnected, solid entity somewhere deep inside. This time, the intuitive mindfulness fish captures ego's concept, and then it discovers the I that appears to exist from itself without depending on anything. Not one dependent particle does not exist as it appears, is totally non-existent within any phenomenon, internal or external. The view of the simultaneously born ego that holds such a projection of ego, the concept of I, the fantasy that you have built up, dissolves. You, the seeker, and the thing sought dissolve. Subject and object dissolve. That is the experience. So if you have that for a second, you're very fortunate, not to mention forever. Okay? You might be scared. This is a natural reaction. For so long, you have believed in this projection of ego, this simultaneously born ego, this built-up fantasy. So when it dissolves, of course, fear will come. During one of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings on emptiness, he saw that one of his chief disciples, the great yogi, suddenly grabbed himself. He knew this meant that the yogi had experienced the loss of his I, his concrete sense of self. For him, the whole universe had gone. His self had gone. He was scared, so he grabbed himself to make sure he was still there. But I read another teaching, also from the Lamas, that said once he did that, panicked by the absence of the I, he then discovered dependent arising, subtle dependent arising. Lama Zopa says, if you do meditate on emptiness and you suddenly get some fear, don't buy into it. Don't resist it, because you can't disappear. It is an impossibility that you'll disappear. That's the main fear, terror of disappearing. You can't. Your mind is literally indestructible. It can never end. You will never, ever, ever disappear. You can't. So not to be afraid, because being afraid of this kind of can build an obstacle in your mind, you know. Don't be afraid. Leave it, let it go. Experience this non-subjective, non-objective state of consciousness. You see, they say when you know, at the level we are at now, which is conceptual, it's necessarily dualistic. There's me, and then there's a thing watching. There's me, and then there's something else. It's always dualistic. So when your mind gets more subtle, and you have that experience, like you said, you know, they say it's like water and milk, or like water and milk mixing, becoming one. There's an experience of non-duality. The best we can say is those words, you know. Subject and object dissolve. Subject and object merge. That's how they talk. That's a non-conceptual experience. That's only when you've got very good concentration. Or you can get a blessing sometimes and have it, you know, due to past meditation, but it won't last because you can't sustain it. And the thing is, many people, I mean, I met so many people all over the world who have some kind of spiritual experience. And of course, they think they're the ants' pants because of it. They think they're some kind of enlightened being, you know, and it can last for weeks. But it's just because of past karma, because of past meditation, you get some kind of experience. You think you're God, you think you're enlightened, and you can easily look, and then you collapses and you think you go crazy, you know. It's really very misleading. It's only because of past meditating. So you've got to sustain it. So don't be fooled by all those experiences. It's nice to have a nice experience, but you just keep going. You just keep going. You just keep going until it's perfected. That's the point. So there's nothing that isn't labeled by your mind. There's, Lama says, you know, these are just my intellectual words. You have to capture this in your meditation with your intuitive mindfulness fish again and again. When you penetrate, the sense of the self-existent I disappears. That is the real Mahamudra experience. You discover the emptiness of the non-self-existent I, the non-absolute I, the I that is totally not existing in any part of your aggregates, the I that does not exist without depending on any circumstance, in particular, without depending on your mind labeling I. You recognize, as Lama Yeshe and Nagarjuna show, that you exist only in name. There's no self-character. Lama has all his own words for this. This is a difficult point. To get the experience of this in is not easy. Comparatively speaking, it's easy to concentrate on the clarity of your consciousness. That's easy, but it's not easy to catch the experience of ego. It appears suddenly without your expecting it. So you have to be ready. Otherwise, as we discussed, you will miss it. It'll disappear and then it's too late. Only afterwards do we think of the solution. So, of course, this applies to everybody else as well, everything else. This is, Lama here is totally focusing on experience the emptiness of yourself. But then we have to eventually, in general, in the world, experience the emptiness of all the other phenomena. And within this meditation, it moves then to the emptiness of the mind, because mind is an example of another phenomena that isn't self. We have to realize the emptiness of persons or self, and we have to realize the emptiness of all the other phenomena. So mind is another phenomenon. It's not the same as self. So first self, then the mind. And this is why Lama says in here that the mind is so special and so powerful that it's a very, very, very powerful object to use to focus on. It can hasten an experience of emptiness. The mind is so powerful. Yeah. Yeah. So what does he say? So ego wants always, you see, always the key thing to get about all the delusions, all of them, all the neuroses, starting with ego grasping and then attachment, aversion, and all the other thousands. They all got their own style. They've each got their own, nonsense. They've each got their own misconception. And that's why you've got to identify each one. But their key function is they embellish, they exaggerate, they add, as Lama Zopa puts it, they add on top layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. So what they do is they decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. So in a sense, the job, starting from the beginning, is first control your body and speech, then you start working on your mind. And what you're doing is, as you progress, is you're removing these layers of nonsense. You get less misconceptions. You're lessening the layers and layers of misconceptions, layers upon layers upon layers, until eventually you remove the subtlest one, the deepest delusion. Finally, that's the one. And then you've got liberation. That are the beginnings of liberation. You've got to continue to perfect that realization. So when your mind is completely enlightened, along with bodhicitta, your mind is like nakedly, clearly seeing everything without a millimeter of mistake. That's the way to say it. So progressing along with this comes less suffering and more happiness for you. That's the bonus. And that's the thing that's so fascinating. We don't think again this way in our culture. As you progress on the path, you are the beneficiary. As you stop harming others, guess what? You become more stable. You become more disciplined. You become more content. And then you get to the mind and you start working on your attachment and your aversion and your jealousy and your depression. You become less neurotic. You become more happy. Then you start to proactively practice compassion on the bodhisattva path. You become even more happy and even more ridiculously happy. So like Lama Zopa, I saw a photo of him in the hospital after his stroke. He looked radiant. He looked radiantly happy. This seems too weird for us. Because the point is very simple. The more delusions are in our mind, the more miserable we are. And the more virtue is in our mind, the more happy we are. It's very simple. It's so simple, it's embarrassing. So happiness is naturally what occurs as you practice controlling your body, your speech, and your mind. You are the beneficiary. That's so tasty. I can't believe it. It's not like, oh, I'm a good girl, I help others, I'm so pathetic, No. You practicing not harming others and you practicing being kind to others benefits you. We really think in our culture that if I'm kind to others, I'm left out. It's quite bizarre, actually. It's quite schizophrenic. Excuse me using that word, Lama Yeshe would use it. It's quite bizarre to think then when you help others, you miss out. So I'll tell you, you will miss out if you're a victim and you're completely addicted to being seen as a good girl and you run around trying to solve everybody else's problems and wonder why you get used as a doormat. That's because of attachment, not because of being kind to others. And that's a big danger for some people. So it's valid virtue, genuine virtue, rooted in dependent arising and steady practice. You can only become happier. You can only become more content. You can only become more self-confident. This is a fact. You have to remember that. You hear it in such a moralistic way. It's so wrong. You know? That's why you have to understand this deepest attachment, the deepest, most primordial level. Since we're born, this craving to be approved of by others, this craving to be seen and heard by others, seen and heard. So literally having attachment, it's like we've got no sense of a valid self at all. We're like a broken half a person who doesn't think we even exist, who thinks we have no validity, who thinks we're not important, our thoughts are not important, and we depend upon other people smiling at us to make us feel, wow, I must be okay. This is really quite mental suffering, and we all have this. This is the deepest delusion, attachment to being seen and heard. More simply, attachment to being liked. We are desperate for it. Because why? Because unless someone likes us, we think we're a shit. This is the terrible, terrible tragedy. This is the worst attachment possible, the deepest attachment, the longest, the deepest to go. This is why we suffer so badly in our lives. We're just desperate to be liked, desperate to be seen as a nice person. And what we do is driven by that, also unconscious. We're then we are constantly adjusting our behavior fearfully to make sure we say and do what the person in front of us approves of. So we're so inauthentic because of it. Got no sense of self, no sense of validity, no sense of worth. That's why we get lonely. Think about loneliness. Think about loneliness. I have got no one to share my life with. I mean, it's nice to have friends. No one says it's not. When we see this suffering, what do you mean? You know, in other words, you're nothing because no one else is saying, listen to your thoughts. So you've got to ask the question, why are your thoughts? Why are your thoughts and why is your life not valuable until someone else hears it? You've got to ask yourself that question. It's very bizarre. We should be embarrassed by it. But it's how deep the attachment is. There's an assumption that we're nothing unless someone else likes us. Someone else approves of us. It's the most primordial, and it drives most of our actions. We run around, even run around helping people. It's driven by being a good girl. And you define yourself as a good girl, and you wonder why you get hurt by people. You wonder why you get insulted and offended by people. You stick your nose in where it doesn't belong, thinking you're being kind. You mean well, but your pride, your anger, your attachment to being seen as a good girl are desperate, and they destroy it. All these are so subtle. They all work together, these different delusions. They all got their job to cause us suffering, particular job, each one of them. Pride causes our suffering in a certain way. Anger causes suffering in a certain way. Attachment to reputation causes suffering in a certain way. Attachment to get what you want. Attachment to comfort. All these variations. But the one of reputation is the most primordial. Since you're born, you're trying to, you're trying to get mummy to smile. Or she must approve of me. You know? That's why we're so lonely and sad. No one loves me. No one approves of me. So I must be a nothing. This is so shocking. There's a lovely phrase, we've got to become our own person. We've got to build ourselves up from inside. Learn to approve of ourselves, become our own person. This is huge. This is what giving up attachment means. And learn to know what the hell you want in your life and have the courage to want it, and then with the best motivation, pursue it. I always quote this. I said it yesterday, the day before. This nurse who did this research in England, the greatest regrets of the dying. The greatest regret was I didn't follow my heart. I didn't do what I really knew I wanted to do. I did what I was expected to do. We all live our lives like this, thinking we're being noble. No, we're terrified. We think it's, oh, I don't want to upset people. Rubbish. You don't want them to dislike you. That's why we're so scared. To be authentic, to be clear. We don't even know what we want. We don't even know how we feel because we're desperate to get other people's signing off on us first. This is how deep it is. It's so spontaneous. It's hard just to see. It's easy to see attachment to food, easier to see attachment to Netflix. This is a really tough one to see. It's hidden deep, you know. And then it's got the guise of being a nice person. You run around helping people and running things, and you wonder why you get upset people. You wonder why you get hurt, because you need to be approved of all the time. And then people are fed up with you because you're sticking your nose in where it doesn't belong. Poor me. This is called suffering. I'm not being mean. So the wisdom wing is all about you. It means mind your own business, back off and leave people alone. The compassion wing is, yes, get in there and help people. You've got to work on yourself first. Calm your own delusions down. Become your own person. Calm down. Leave people alone. Back off, back off, back off. It's a very internal, intense, personal job, the wisdom wing, sorting yourself out first. Any questions for me? Yes, Cyril, sweetheart, talk to me.
Yes, thank you, Venerable. Yes, I would like to know concerning the wisdom wing and the compassion wing. So in one case, we in the wisdom wing, we get into ourselves, maybe in solitude, maybe.
Oh, what, darling? Speak a bit slower. What?
Maybe in the concerning the wisdom wing, maybe we tend to go to solitude.
What?
Solitude.
No, depend if you're ready for that, Cyril. But if, of course, that's the ideal scenario. The ideal way to do the wisdom wing is give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and mortgages and dogs and things. Become a monk and go to the mountains. That's the ideal, quickest, direct method to accomplish the wisdom wing. To get renunciation, to live in vows, get renunciation, get shamatha, and realize emptiness. That's the quickest, direct route. But 99.9% of us, honey child, aren't ready for that. So, but the inner, the wisdom wing it is like the retreat mode. It's internal. It's you working on your own mind, you controlling your body, your speech, and your mind, you doing your practice, you identifying your delusions. Stop pointing fingers at other people. Always, every experience will bring you back to your own mind. It's a very internal process. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good.
And the compassion wing is going towards others. So it's a little bit contradictory. So
Stop. Cyril.
Yes.
They're different approaches. What do you mean they're contradictory?
No, yes, it's different approaches.
What do you mean contradictory? That's a mistake.
I mean, because we can't be in solitude and with other people at the same time, no?
You've got to do what you can do according to your capacity. Listen to me. You say you want to go off and be compassionate and help people get healthy, and you got to learn nutrition first yourself. Do you agree?
Yes.
That's wisdom wing. You can't just rush off and help people with nutrition and you haven't even learned it yourself. So necessarily you've got to have a head in your books and you've got to go to your courses and you've got to do your memorizing. And it looks like you're being selfish. You're doing the wisdom wing. You're organizing. You're getting yourself educated with health. Now you can go out there and help others according to your capacity. Same here.
Okay, so we first begin with wisdom in the first time.
What?
We begin with wisdom at the first step.
So what do you think wisdom means, Cyril? What do you think?
I mean, go studying in solitude and.
No. What do you think it means, wisdom wing?
Wisdom is
all these teachings here. What are you hearing the wisdom wing work is?
Is looking at the internal and looking at the mind, and
the first one is what? The very first level is what?
Is karma.
No, yeah, abiding by the laws of karma, living in vows, controlling your body and speech.
Yes.
That's your first level.
Yes.
Practice living in morality. You practice harnessing your crazy energy. Then you can work on your mind and you practice harnessing your crazy mind. That's the basic job of all Buddhists.
Yes.
Then, as you get better and better, you can afford to then reach out and be something useful to people. Mostly now we make a mess with other people because our attachment is based on our compassion is based on attachment. So it's one step at a time, incremental, gradual progress.
Okay.
Good?
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So it's better to stay in solitude at the beginning.
Sweetheart, now you're back to the first question, as if we didn't need to
Okay.
discuss. Well, relax.
Thank you.
Hey, come on. You're on track. It's okay. What else, people? Where? Go, Tony.
Yeah, it's not properly formulated, but it's
What, sweetheart? What?
it's not properly formulated, but it's just wondering about attachment to being light and around specifically around child development and around there's different. There was an experiment, still phase, where the mum was interacting with the baby and responding.
The mum was what?
Interacting with the baby with the faces,
That's
and then stopped, and then suddenly stopped, and so the baby was interacting with the mother, but the mother stopped interacting facially.
And what happened to the baby?
And the baby started to seek,
freak out.
Yes, to get distressed. And,
of course. Let's analyze this. This is perfect. Okay, this is not how we think in the West, and it's really hard to hear it. There's two things going on with a mother. The mummy's got attachment for sure, and there's a strong karmic history with that baby because of past lives, and that little baby comes to that mummy's womb very particularly, so there's a very big bond there, straight away, right there, amazing. So naturally, there's going to be masses of attachment for each other. That's just natural. It's part of the deal. We're all samsari. There'll be masses of attachment for each other. That means the baby from day one will have masses of attachment for mummy to love her. That's just natural. And then mummy has got attachment to this divine being and adorable and touch her and look at her and think of her and sweet, right? But mummy, alongside that, mummy's got some virtue and she has got love and she's got some wisdom, hopefully, and she's got some compassion as well. So and as the baby's starting to grow, even the baby or not, or child, then she starts not just attachment, but also love and compassion. You know, she gets patient and she's kind to the baby. It's not just attachment, but the point is this. If that baby has, let's say, more attachment than it has virtue, and this is not being mean, not even, let's cancel that. We've all got attachment to being seen and loved and heard if we're ordinary samsaric beings. Unless you come into this life and you're a bodhisattva, you've got it. So it's automatic. The moment the baby, when it's inarticulate, it's not grown up yet, mummy isn't giving approval. Why do you think the baby gets upset? Because her little attachment didn't get what it wanted and she's panicking. That's it's natural. So that's why, you know, I mean, I know some people who had terrible mothers, but they've got so many good qualities since they're tiny, they didn't suffer much because they have compassion and love. I mean, one of my friends on death row in San Francisco, he's, you know, had a junkie mother, a garbage mother, but he always loved his mother. Even when he was under the table, terrified because the boyfriend's beating up mummy and mummy's there on heroin, he's thinking, how can I help mummy? He's not thinking, how come mummy's a junkie and poor me?
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, so if you've got compassion in that child's mind, if that child comes into, because we come into this life programmed with our own stuff. We don't think this in the West. So if that child has got not much attachment to reputation, but more love, they won't suffer so badly. They'll suffer a little bit, but not tremendously. The child who has terrible, what we call it bonding issues, what do we call it, abandonment. They can have a mother who really does love them, but because their own attachment to being seen and heard is so tremendous, no matter, they're 97 and they're still feeling mummy doesn't love them enough. So you have to factor in we don't factor in a child, we factor in only the mother, and then we think the child got born as an empty slate and the mother proceeds to. It just doesn't work like that. If you do the Buddhist one, the child, it's like a tennis match. The child comes in with its own stuff, independence upon the mother, and they interact. So a child with not much attachment and a lot of love and compassion can have the shittiest mother on earth and not suffer so badly. And a child with lots of attachment and lots of self-centeredness can have the perfect mother and only ever suffer. We've got to factor in both components. We only factor in the mother as if she's the job of literally creating the child, you know. Do you understand? It makes a huge difference. I mean, when we have children, or when we meet children or whatever it is, the first thing, if you see a kid behaving badly, we think, oh, wow, what is their family like? What is their mother doing to them? Their mother might be a saint. I remember the two Columbine kids, you know, those kids. out of their brains, it seemed like, with paranoia and weird conspiracy theories and wacko, you know, suffering, in other words. Everybody just assumed the parents were the blame. And they were infuriated because these parents were nice white Christian parents and nobody could find fault. There's one of the mothers, after 20 years, she wrote a memoir like a couple of years ago, 20 years anniversary. She suffered, you can't, it's typical, because she believed she created her children. She believed it was her own fault. The abuse, the abuse they received from people all over the world because they were the blame. It broke up the family. It caused this incredible suffering. She blamed herself, full of guilt. You understand? Because we think she created the babies and she had to be the blame. We don't know where to look in the West, you know, we don't, except for the family, except for the parents, except for the mother, because they create the child. No one believed that it couldn't have been there who was the problem. They even dug out the boy's brains to see where the problem was, you know. Do you understand? So factor in the child. So as soon as you see a child, you see them out of control. I don't care what their mother did to them. In a sense, it doesn't matter. That's called anger. That's called jealousy. See it for what it is, and then have compassion for them. They might have a nice mummy, but they've just got a lot of jealousy. But we assume they're jealous because some mother did something, so we can't work it out. See the child for who they are. When we know our own mind, you can see another person's mind naked. You can see them in 1 minute and know how to help them, because we're seeing the child's mind, the person's mind. Whereas we have to sort of do an analysis of what happened to them when they were a kid, you know? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. It's a different analysis. Very fascinating. What is it? Time for something. $2:30. Okay.
There's a question from David.
Okay, good. Go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You read something from Lama about how to penetrate the solid I, the inherent I, and I wondered because how you do it, you don't do it consciously in the sense that you start analyzing, but in that way you start with a subtle mind.
No,
So,
Dave, you're losing me completely. I'm lost. All your words, your sentence. I have no idea what you're saying. So ask me.
well, you read a part. You read a part about the.
Ask me a question.
It was about the part you read from Lama's book.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was about the penetration of the solid I, of the inherent I.
So good. So
in the meditation.
So good. Ask your question.
Yeah. Is that a conscious effort, or does it happen by itself? As in, the subtle mind perceives it and suddenly...
No. I can't even answer, because that's such a small statement. Penetrate. This is how Lama talks. I've got to look at the whole sentence and look at the paragraph. So more broadly, what's your question? More broadly, what's your question, David?
Yeah, is it something that sort of like when you're watching this solid I appear, does it then spontaneously dissolve, or do you consciously go into this feeling of the solid I?
So you're sitting at the piano and you've been practicing Bach for years, okay? You've been practicing and practicing and practicing. You make mistakes, you fix it up. You make mistakes, you fix it up. And at some point, you suddenly play it nicely, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You understand me?
Mm-hmm.
So your question is, oh, does that happen suddenly from its own side? No, it's the result of years and years of hard work. Same with anything that might happen if you're sitting quietly in your meditation. You've done all the work, so you might get a moment when a little bit of a kind of an aha moment might come. It's the result of your hard work. It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Okay.
And based on that, do you have another question?
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think I get that point. I'm just wondering if I think I'm still puzzled about the non-conceptual part of the mind being just aware, and then suddenly it dawns on it.
Okay, David, until you've got single-pointed concentration, until you've done that technique and have completely subdued your mind, totally subdued conceptuality, totally subdued the sensory consciousness, and gone to a subtle level of your mind where you have pointedness. Until then, you won't be non-conceptual. It's a highly
Okay,
advanced
okay,
state.
okay,
Do you understand?
okay. Yeah, I understand.
Good,
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay, Sarah's got a question as well online.
Good, sweetheart, yeah. Hello, darling. Sarah, talk to me.
Hello, hello. My question is, do I need to progress along the path? Do I need a Lama? Because I don't have one. I have teachers that inspire me, mostly through the internet, you know, like on Zoom and YouTube and books, you know, but I don't have a Lama in person, a teacher like that. Do I need one to progress along the path?
Okay, I have your question, Sarah, exactly. Think about your own life and anything you've learned, okay? Anything since you're a tiny child. Think about things you've learned. Would you agree that there's nothing you've really learned properly that hasn't come from learning it from somebody? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so even making a cake, you can read many recipe books, but I think if you think of that, even this experience of making a cake, if you can think of a moment you have a good cake maker and you want to make a cake and you go to the kitchen and you say, please show me how to make a cake, and they'll show you how to make a cake. My feeling is that's a very powerful experience. It makes it more easily experiential, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's just making a cake, babe. So can you imagine developing your mind to perfection and all the rest of it? So of course you need teachers. At any level you can adjust, any level you can cultivate those relationships. So that's up to you to find the teachers you like, to cultivate the relationships. If the ones you like, you contact, you do more, you have more contact, you then study, you practice, and you use them as your guides, sweetheart. You understand?
So I really want to find one. So what I need to do is just do the footwork and get out there and find
what
one.
you're doing. Keep doing exactly, darling girl, what you're doing. And that includes these days Zoom. It didn't 10 years ago. So now it means Zoom. You can connect with so many people, and you learn, you'll gradually, as you keep moving forward, you'll gradually find your path, your system, your style. That'll narrow your options. You start to meet teachers and you'll connect, and you'll connect with the ones that you feel are most inspiring. It's a dependent, it's up to you. You're the one, you know, they're all there twiddling their thumbs, waiting to help you. So it's up to us to do the work of moving through, checking all the time, analyzing, checking, practicing, and it will happen. If you've got
And then do you ask them specifically to be your Lama?
how else would you learn to, you know, don't just barge into some cooking shop and just say, show me how to make a cake, or just act as if you're in the class. You ought to ask first. It would be reasonable, wouldn't it? Don't you think? Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. What else? Maybe now. I think let's finish this part of the course. I think so, don't you? Enough food for thought. Do you not think so? Enough food for thought about emptiness and the mind and our true nature and all this. I really recommend you get Lama's book. You can see it's so tasty, and just read for the blessings. You know. So we dedicate this part of our course, and so we just think how marvelous. We've been listening to Lama's teachings about Mahamudra, this amazing technique. May we continue to practice what we can, be very authentic and thorough in your research of the teachers and the systems you're using. Don't just close your eyes and cross your fingers and hope for the best. It doesn't work like that. And just keep practicing, keep working, keep moving. All these seeds we've planted this weekend, how marvelous. Nourish them with our practice. Keep moving, keep moving. And we dedicate all these seeds so that we do become a Buddha in the future, so we can benefit others. How amazing.